Hello guys, today we're going to be looking at the deadliest battle of the Civil War, the Battle of Gettysburg, which is also seen by many as the turning point of the war. Here are your goals. So by 1863, the North's strategies of total war were beginning to take effect. The blockade was tightening and Grant had basically closed off the Mississippi. But there was still one big obstacle that stood between the North and victory. And this was that the South's main army, known as the Army of Northern Virginia, led by Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jackson, was still standing strong. This army would need to be defeated in order to bring about a quick end to the war. So the North tries to defeat the Army of Northern Virginia in 1862 and 1863. But at first, these attempts are unsuccessful. At the Battle of Fredericksburg in 1862, the Northern Army attacks Robert E. Lee's army and is dealt a crushing defeat in which they lose around 12,000 men, while the South loses only about 5,000 men. So the North is handed a huge defeat at Fredericksburg. And then again at Chancellorsville, the Northern Army tries to go around the Southern Army, but the Southern Army is able to meet them. Stonewall Jackson leads a flanking maneuver where he goes around the side of the Northern Army, surprises the Northern Army, and leads to yet another decisive victory for the South. The only drawback in this battle is that Stonewall Jackson is killed toward the end of the battle, so the South loses its second greatest general. In spite of the loss of Stonewall Jackson, the Southern Army begins to feel invincible, having won yet another two important battles. And so Lee sees that the war is starting to go against the South, that he can hold strong in Virginia, but that the rest of the South is slowly caving in under the Northern tactic of total war. And so Lee decides that he needs to try and win a decisive victory in the North in order to bring about the end of the war as soon as possible. And so, with his army that feels invincible, he marches northward, this time marching all the way north into Pennsylvania, where he gets to by July 1863. In the summer of 1863 in Pennsylvania, the Battle of Gettysburg occurs. And this turns out to be the largest and most decisive battle of the war, but it starts out as an accident. Basically, part of the Southern Army had been detached from the main army in order to go into the little town of Gettysburg to look for shoes, because Gettysburg had a shoe factory and the Southerners were running out of shoes because of the Northern blockade. So they thought maybe they could get some there. But while on the way to Gettysburg, they bump into part of the Northern Army who was out on patrol. Both sides start fighting right away and call for reinforcements. Soon, the full armies of both sides are engaged, and it turns out to be about 90,000 Northern troops against 71,000 Southern troops. In spite of their numerical superiority, the North falls back and decides that it's just going to defend high ground. At this point, the South could have pulled back and tried to find a better position to fight, but instead they launched a full-out attack against the hill. There's 2 or 3 days of fierce fighting, and eventually the South is forced to pull back after suffering heavy losses trying to storm this hill. And the battle ends with an incredible number of casualties, around 40,000 on each side. But the Northern Army is able to deal with this loss, whereas the Southern Army has been reduced to about half of its size and is now forced to retreat. And many people view this, the Battle of Gettysburg, as the beginning of the end of the Confederacy. Before this, Lee's army believed that it was a match for the Northern Army, but after this, the North and the South know that Lee's army is vulnerable and that it could be crushed by the overwhelming numbers of the North. In response to this terrible, bloody battle at Gettysburg, President Lincoln decides to commemorate the dead of Gettysburg in a special ceremony in November 1863. Lincoln uses this as an opportunity to reaffirm American values and to justify the continued war effort. And he does this in one of the most famous speeches in American history, the Gettysburg Address. In this speech, which is only 270-ish words long, he reaffirms the value expressed in the Declaration of Independence that all men are created equal. And he says that this is a value that the North is fighting to prove. On top of this, he says that the North is fighting to ensure that the government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from the earth. So he identifies the Northern cause with equality for all men and for true democracy. And that is why he says the North is fighting for the war. His speech becomes very popular and is adopted by many people as an explanation for why the war effort must continue. We'll be looking at this address in more detail tomorrow in class. All right, here are your goals. Make sure you've got these down for class tomorrow.